Hey bug farmers, welcome to Bug Farmer Beekeeping, where we dive into the world of apiculture, beekeeping, and bees every week. This is the place to share laughs, explore bees, and learn together, all without taking ourselves too seriously. To join our buzzing community, it's easy and it's free. Just hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, and let's cultivate beekeeping knowledge and fun together. Now, let's get into the bees. Hi, and welcome back to the channel today. Well, today we're down in the shop again. It's 33 degrees outside. It's too cold to get into the hives. And this morning when I woke up, it was 27 degrees. Now, I might be a little bit jittery today. This is my fourth cup of coffee. So if I turn into Kramer, then you understand why. It's too much caffeine. But today I thought I would take advantage of this time indoors to share with you a thought, an idea, a contemplation that I had while working in my shop yesterday trying to clean up gear for the season. It occurred to me that when I first started beekeeping, when I was just 6 or 7 years ago, the biggest question that I had was, what do I do in the spring and when does the flow come? How do I know the flow is coming? What's the timing? I had no idea what the timing was, and I didn't know what to look for in order to find the flow. And it's a hard question to answer because we all live in different parts of the United States or different parts of the world for that matter. And the flow might start for me before it starts for you, or start for you before it starts for me. So there's really some signs that you need to look for, and it's all about timing and it's all about the weather. So when I say it's about timing and about the weather, it's just that simple. Now, what I like to do is I like to go to the Weather Underground and I like to look at the extended forecast. I don't look at the 10-day, I look at the 30-day. You can actually pull up a calendar and it'll show you what the weather is expected to be based on past trends for the next 30 days. Now, when I start getting close to spring, i.e. in my area, February, it's time for me to start looking at the calendar to see if I'm going to have a warm spell. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the cold spells are over, but it's a warm spell where I can actually get out and inspect my boxes. I look for queens, I get out and look for food, I look for brood to make sure that these girls have everything they need in order to make it through the rest of the winter, which should only be a few more weeks at this point. Now, if you follow this channel, you've seen us go through the home yard already and the farmyard doing just that. I had to make sure that everybody had what they needed. Now, when I did my inspection at the farmyard, I found that some of my bees did not have enough food and others had too much food. So I did move some frames around and gave everybody what they needed to make it for the last few weeks before winter's finally over. So after I've done my initial inspection, the next thing that I want to do is I want to maintain my equipment and get it prepared for the flow. That means going through my boxes, making sure that I've got ample frames, make sure that the frames are waxed if I choose to wax them, and then make sure that everything is ready to go so that in a moment's notice I can get it out into the bee yard. Now, if this isn't your first year, you may have some wax laying around and you might want to pre-wax your frames. Now, you can buy frames that are pre-waxed. That's easy enough to do, but you can also grab yourself a little brush and use your wax cappings from the year before, put them in a crock pot, melt it down. I warn you, you're gonna destroy your crock pot. Make sure your wife is okay with it, or buy one specifically for your wax, because once you've put wax in it, it's pretty much used for the bees from that point forward. But you dip it in, you can put some extra wax on there, and that's gonna help the bees take to the frames once you put them on the colony. Okay, so now that we've got our inspection done and now that we've got our equipment ready, I go back to the Weather Underground and I look at the 30-day forecast and I try to find out when is the weather going to break? When are we not going to have any more cold temperatures at night? And when I say cold temperatures, I mean below 40 degrees. When the temperatures are above 40 degrees going forward perpetually, and I know that winter's pretty much gone and spring is coming, that tells me in my head I've got 30 to 45 days before the flow is on. So now that the clock is ticking, it's important for me to get the queen down into the bottom box. If I run a double deep or a deep and a medium going into winter, I want to make sure that I've got the queen moved down to the bottom box. It's also time to focus on the expansion of the colony. So you want to give your queen a pollen patty so that she has everything that she needs in order to produce brood. Now, it's important for you new beekeepers to understand there's two kinds of food inside of a hive for a bee. One is pollen, that is their protein. The other is the honey, that is their carbohydrate. Providing a carbohydrate is not going to get your queen to engage in laying, but providing pollen patties or pollen substitute when there's none in the environment will. You can buy pollen patties at pretty much any beekeeping supply store, or you can go out to Hive Alive and they can sell you pollen patties, or you can use pollen sub, mix with some sugar syrup and make your own pollen patties. But it's important at this time, at this stage of the game, the clock is ticking, it's time to get some pollen on the hive so that the queen has what she needs to start laying brood. So another thing that I like to focus on while the queen has got some pollen patties and she's busy making brood is I like the girls that are in the hive to start drawing wax. Well, because there's no nectar coming in from the environment, I can trick the girls into activating their wax glands. And trick is a strong word. We can manipulate the girls into drawing wax by providing them with some light sugar syrup as feed. Now, when I say light sugar syrup, I don't mean 1-to-1. I don't mean 2-to-1. I mean 1/3 to 1, 1/2 to 1. Kind of like hummingbird feed is what you want. You want them to feel like they're getting nectar, and that's going to cause them to start drawing out comb in your box. I like to use a bucket feeder. You might use a jar or an internal feeder. The bottom line is the goal for me is to have these girls start drawing out comb, and I do that by activating their wax glands with light sugar syrup. Okay, so it's been 30 days since we've had our last cold spell, and we're on that 45-day clock, and it's time now that the brood that the queen has been laying has started to hatch, and you're starting to get a strong population inside the hive. Well, now's the time to take care of it, because one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to split your hive or they're going to split themselves. If they split themselves, you're going to lose half your bees, and you're going to be behind the 8-ball and not have a strong enough colony to bring in the maximum amount of honey. Okay, so splitting hive is easy. Basically, you set up a second hive, you face it towards the south, southeast, or east so that it gets morning sunlight on the landing board, and you take the queen and a couple of frames of bees from your busy hive and you move it into the new hive. That will become their new colony, and if you do nothing else, as long as you left some eggs that are less than 2 days old or less in the original hive, they will make a new queen that will grow up, go out and mate and come back, and she'll be ready to go. If you don't want to wait for the bees to make a new queen, you can purchase a new queen, wait a couple of days, put the new queen in there, they'll chew her out. You'll have to go back and remove some queen cells if they don't tear them down, but you should be in good shape putting a new queen in that colony. Okay, so there's more than one sign to tell you that it's time to do splits. It's not just the population, but generally about 30 days after you start feeding pollen patties, you're gonna have a lot of brood in that box and it's gonna be time to split. But another tell, so to speak, is you're going to see a lot of drone brood in your hive. Now, the drone brood, it looks a little bit different than the standard worker brood. It's not flat across the top. It's going to look like popcorn on the frame. If you start seeing a lot of that, that means they're about ready to kick some drones into the environment, which means a lot of the colonies are getting ready to split. So it's important to know that when you do your split, you don't actually have to move the bees out of the box. There is something called the Demarest method, or the Demarest split, which allows you to basically do an internal split in your hive. Now, if that's something that you're interested in, I can tell you a couple of things. One, it's a lot of work, but you will get a lot of honey because you will go into the flow with a very, very strong population. If you're interested in that, look down on my library. I've got a video on Demarest splits, and I actually did them at the farmyard last year, and I got about 1,300 pounds of honey, but I got a really bad back on top of that. So if you're interested in Demarest splits or doing an internal split, look at that video, and that'll give you all the information you need to know. For me this year, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm just going to take all the brood that I see that the queen has laid down in the bottom box. I'm going to move it above the queen excluder, directly above the brood box, give the queen some empty frames, let her continue to do what she's going to do, but I'm going to remove the congestion out of the bottom box because the nurse bees should stay above the queen excluder until those bees hatch, and by that time the flow should be on. Okay, so at this point in the calendar, we are in the flow. The flow is just kicked off, and I want to make sure that I've got a large population of bees in my hive and a healthy population of bees in my hive. Now, I can do this by giving them probiotic, and that keeps their gut health right, keeps those girls strong and out there working because they're going to work themselves to death. That's what bees do. And I also want to make sure that I keep the pests away like ants, hive beetles, and the varroa mite. Now, ants can be taken care of with an ant moat or something like that around the hive, or some pesticide, I'm going to say it, on the ground around your hive that keeps ants away. And you can use something called Grub-X that'll keep the hive beetles away, because when the hive beetles get in your hive, what they will do is they will make a larva that jumps out into the ground, digs in there, pupates, turns into a hive beetle, and comes back in your hive. You don't want that, so some Grub-X on the ground should keep them away. But I can tell you this, if you're a first-year beekeeper, you might not have to worry about hive beetles. You might not even get attacked by ants, but you're going to get attacked by the varroa mite. It's going to happen. You're going to get varroa mite in your bees. And there are a lot of videos out there that can tell you how to deal with it. It's not that scary. I thought it was very, very scary when I first started beekeeping, but it's not. You can use Apivar strips, use oxalic acid. There's a lot of treatments out there for varroa mites. They're easy to apply. There's a lot of YouTube videos. I suggest you look into that one because you will be treating your bees this year for mites. Okay, so now as a recap, the first thing that we understand is that it's all about timing. We want to make sure that we can identify when that first warm spell is going to hit. So we look at the extended forecast calendar. We know when the warm spell is going to hit. We can do our inspections and make sure that we've given the girls everything they need to get to the final few weeks of winter. After we've done our initial inspection, now we make sure that our equipment is ready to go so that when the flow kicks in, we're ready to gather that nectar. We look at the calendar again. When is the weather going to break for the final time this year? And when are we going to have nighttime temperatures over 40 degrees? That's kind of a message to me that it's time to get the hive ready for expansion. How do we expand the hive? We expand the hive with pollen patties. We expand the hive with very light sugar syrup so the girls can build out the comb that they're going to need to store the nectar when the nectar flow starts. Once we've given the girls everything we need, it's time to worry about splits or keeping as many girls in that box as we can because the flow's coming and we need a huge workforce out there gathering the goods. We can do an external split or an internal split. There's a lot of different methods out there. I suggest that you look on YouTube and see how they all work. Okay, so the last thing that we want to do is we want to maintain strong colonies and keep the bee health where it needs to be so that we can get out there and get the goods and make sure that they fill our boxes with honey. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it answered some questions for you. I know that when I was a new beekeeper, this was the biggest thing that I worried about is when is the flow going to start? How do I know when to start preparing? Well, that's my calendar. After the first warm up, I do my inspection. After I know that there's not going to be any more freezes, I start a 45-day clock. And by the time that 45-day clock runs out, if I've done everything right, I should be in pretty good shape and ready for my bees to get out there and get the honey. I hope this video helped you. If it did, do me a favor, give me a thumbs up. If you have something to say, by all means, please comment. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor, take a moment, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell to be notified of my new content. I do try to drop a video every Friday. We try to keep it light and have fun. So with all that said, be happy, and I will see you next week. Take care.